So just a couple of days ago, Takara Tomy had their Hobby Expo in Tokyo, Japan, and we got to see our very first look at the final Stunticon member breakdown in his combined mode attached to Menasor. And that was that. There was no other ways to see any of the other alt modes. They didn't have that on display. And just the following day, a whole bunch of members in the Japanese community took a whole bunch of photos and shared how that character is going to look and comparisons and everything like that. It looked very nice. These images were on the dark web. They were kind of on the underbelly and were not public, but they were seen by many individuals. And finally, today, the genie is out of the bottle and these images have surfaced. So we're going to talk about these today. We're going to break down, no pun intended, what we're seeing here and all the fine details and surprisingly some interesting design choices by Hasbro this time around. So let's break into that, shall we? Everything that's going on with Transformers Legacy Deluxe Class, break down the final Stunticon member. So Hasbro decided to do already some partials and retools very early into the lifespan of these molds. We all knew that at some point Hasbro was going to repaint and retool these Stunticon members to get more engineering and cost out of all that time that they've invested into these molds. I didn't think it would be done internally within the actual Stunticon team, but that is the case. I know I could understand, people sometimes could look at Wildrider and Breakdown and assume that they're kind of the same car or they're part of the same mold because they're both European exotic sports cars from the 80s. The thing is, they are two very different cars. Wildrider is a Ferrari and Breakdown is a Countach Lamborghini. But they do have their similarities in shape, even dating all the way back to their original Generation 1 molds and, of course, how they looked in the cartoon and how they were drawn. They were always drawn very similar to each other. But that's also kind of unfortunately, a side effect of being the Scramble City molds and being all kind of the same shape and tooling. So this time around, what they did, and it's kind of a shame, is while the original Legacy Wildrider looks very animation accurate in its alt mode, and Hasbro made a strong attempt to match all the details and the venting and the shape of the windshields and the side mirrors and everything. Very fantastic job. By taking that Wildrider and making it a partial and a retool into Breakdown, a lot of the details of the original Breakdown animation model and alt mode kind of disappear. And they kind of just end up, all that stuff disappears and the existing Wildrider designs just kind of stay on there. We'll explain that in a moment. So we'll start with the robot mode, because the robot mode at least has a lot of where the tooling goes into. When you look at the robot mode, it's not as obvious that is a partial retool of the Wildrider mold, because all the veneering is brand new. There's brand new tooling on him, brand new head sculpt, fantastic head sculpt, looks really good. Matches the animation model completely. That's really nice. The brand new chest tooling, which matches the T design of the original Breakdown animation model by Fleur O'Deary from the Generation 1 cartoon, so that looks really good. Missing the Decepticon tampo on the side, which, it's funny because they've really been good with that. They've been really good at making sure that those little Decepticon tampos or little emblems that appear on characters' bodies, they make sure that they appear on them in those specific areas. That's not the case here, unfortunately. Aside from that, really, the blue detail for the fists is done well, so they kept that in there nicely. We see the knee detail is very nice too, so they managed to keep all the nice knee detail and the veneering of the two dots of his knees from the original animation model. Again, not present on the original Wildrider sculpt, so that's a brand new tooling there. Same thing with the front of the legs, the venting there. Everything is nice otherwise. The painting for the front of the legs to match the original boots looks really, really good. Now, also comes with two guns, and those two guns, while he only had one gun originally in the show, the sculpting does match how the original gun looked with the little butt on the end of it, so it looks really nice. But he comes with two of them, and those two of them are to kind of emulate the Scramble City gimmick. Now, we'll get into that when we get into the alt mode, but before we get into the alt mode, there's also an interesting twist and turn because he is a retool of the of the Wild Rider, and he has a spoiler that's on his back, and the spoiler is supposed to be hidden in the robot mode. So what they do is, because the spoiler is a peg piece, they have it that when you transform it, you pick one of the pegs on the back of the leg, you turn it sideways, and you decide where to hide it behind which leg in his robot mode. But the spoiler could also be used as a weapon in a lot of ways. But it's an interesting workaround, because they could have made the spoiler two separate pieces, and they could have just, again, no pun intended, break down behind him. But they decided to make it one piece and kind of just tuck it away there. Some people might not like how that looks. Some people might appreciate that, because then it kind of makes a weapon in the process too. But again, it's kind of, unfortunately, maybe a side effect of being a partial from another mold instead of doing something from the ground up completely. Because if you look at how the original Wild Rider was, he kind of also had that thing. And you also add to the fact that they want to have the dual buster gimmick from the Scramble City days, meaning to have the double giant blaster in robot mode. In vehicle mode that so many of those characters had, not even non-Stunticon characters. They wanted to maintain that. And let's get into that specifically when we get into the alt mode. And so the alt mode, right away when you look at it, you could see all the partial details from that of Wild Rider. You could see the venting that's on the hood that's still available. You could see his side window, how it's just giant side window that doesn't match the original animation model of Breakdown, because again, he's a partial of another car completely, which is supposed to be the Ferrari. In this case, now it's the original Lamborghini it's trying to emulate. And so a lot of things are missing, unfortunately. And again, the back is a brand new tooling. And that new tooling is to then accommodate the spoiler and stuff like that, and have the two pegs under the spoiler so that it could have the weapons clip in and emulate that kind of dual blaster gimmick. But it's unfortunate how the alt mode turned out. It's very not Countach looking. It really is just, to the naked eye, it really is just a straight up repaint and slight retool of the Wild Rider mold. So it's kind of a shame how the alt mode turned out. It's very, very unfortunate, because they did a fantastic job with all the other members, and he feels kind of like a second thought in a lot of ways. And considering that of the Stunticon members, Breakdown is the one that later becomes G2 Breakdown, the infamous BotCon exclusive that would get tons of repaints and homages throughout the years. And it's such a shame that they kind of went loosey-goosey with this very last one here. Very, very, very bizarre. But otherwise, he still looks pretty good. It's definitely a step up from what we got, back in the day with Combiner Wars. That was, that was a valiant attempt at best, both on the Japanese side with United Warrior, and of course the American side with Combiner Wars. So this at least is a step up, but it's a shame that he just kind of is this retool, and he's not a brand new sculpt. I could understand why they didn't want to make a brand new sculpt, because they're so similar between each other that they figured maybe we could somehow tool something out of Wild Rider and turn it into a Breakdown, and we could get away with it. But I think they just didn't tool enough that could really make it look like two separate cars. And again, as someone who's a car guy, you really notice the details, like the way the windshield is shaped, the way the side windows are shaped, the way the front end is shaped, and it doesn't slope down in the same way like a Countach from 83. It's different. It's definitely different. The venting is different. And it's a shame, because when you look at Wild Rider and how he turned out and how they really made an effort to make him look like that Ferrari, it's a shame. But otherwise, robot mode's nice. And when you really think about it, really at the end of the day, Proto, this thing's going to be probably in most people's displays part of Menasor, attached to the back of Menasor's leg. You won't even see him, which is kind of a shame in a lot of ways when you think about it. And it won't be too big a deal for most people, which is kind of a shame. It's all of that for naught, really, in the end. But, let me know what you think. It is kind of interesting what we see here, but it could have been better. It could have been better, but I think they just know that they have to make the best of these molds, and we're going to probably be seeing these molds in the long run being retooled and repainted into other characters. And this is kind of a lot of ways the first step of that, aside from Shadow, obviously Shadow strip that we saw from the Velocitron 500 collection from the drag strip. So we're definitely going to see more of this in the future.